Today is Juneteenth. Frankly, it's not a word I knew. It's not a holiday that I recognized. And I would like to acknowledge that failure to have known more and to share what I have learned. But before I do, I want to just talk about slavery. We, as a Jewish people, have embedded at our core a memory of slavery. So central is the image of that past to us that we as a people know when we were freed. We know the date, the 15th of Nisan, when there was a full moon marking springtime. In fact, we as a people even know what we ate as we moved from slavery to freedom. For when we gather as families to mark Seder and we have before us the bread of affliction, lechem oni, and we taste the maror, the bitter herbs, so that we will tear up, we are not only reminded she'avadim hayinu, that we were slaves be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt, but we're reminded of the departure, of the day and what we ate. For in order for us to move forward as a people, as a spiritual people, we needed to own both that past, but more, to take away a therefore. Slavery means that you are an object to somebody who treats you as other than human. When I visited the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., I became aware of just how brutal slavery was for African Americans. Probably no different than for our ancestors in Egypt. For when you are a slave, for me this is what was most visceral as a father on the weekend of Father's Day. Your children are not yours. They can be taken away and sold to somebody else. I dare say your daughters can be used as property of somebody else. You have no control over your life, no dignity that comes with being able to make choices, with the dignity of saying, I quit. I want a better future for my children, for me. That's why we as a religious people, as a Jewish people, tell that story. For to know what it means to be dehumanized is to celebrate freedom. Juneteenth is Freedom Day or Liberation Day in the African American community. It marks an event that occurred on this day of June 19th in 1865. The Civil War never really formally ended. There was no peace treaty. Jefferson Davis was to say in that year of 1865 that it's as if the Confederacy disappeared. For as the Union forces moved through those 7 Confederate states, African American slaves were freed. This event in the summer occurred fully 2.5 years after Emancipation Proclamation by President Lincoln. I will add in my research today that I learned that when in 1860 President Lincoln to-be campaigned for the presidency, he campaigned on the platform not to eliminate slavery from the 7 states that already had it, but rather that slavery would not continue to grow in the new territories. And when he was elected, those 7 states that had slaves, in 1860, those 7 states had a population of a little over 9 million. and of those 4 million were slaves, creating a very strong economy in the South. And it was a huge difficulty in a time of cotton as the gold of the day to let go of slavery. And so back to June 19th, the Union forces had already completed their battles among those 7 states, and they kept moving into those new territories. And so General Gordon Granger was in charge of Texas. And on this date, he stood on the roof, on the balcony of Ashton Villa in Galveston, Texas. And he proclaimed that all enslaved persons in the U.S. were now free. It represents the end of that process of the liberation of the slaves. Remarkably, this date of June 19th didn't become Juneteenth in the way that we now on this moment think of it. It became a nationwide celebration among Black Americans in the 20th century, but it was only in 2011 and 2015, the 150th anniversaries of the Civil War, that Juneteenth moved to greater prominence and continued to grow in prominence with the Black Lives Matter movement. And only this week, elected officials in New York and Virginia have announced plans to make Juneteenth a paid holiday. It's only this week that for the first time, prominent businesses like Nike and Twitter and the NFL have declared that they will make it a payday for their employees. And so I pause, knowing that time is limited. There is so much I learned today more about the Civil War and the horrors of slavery and the challenges of overcoming that past. I will share in just a couple closing comments that when I was in my last year of rabbinical school, I was invited to Atlanta, Georgia, to participate in a conference at the International Theological Seminary, the consortium of African American theological schools that graduate the majority of African American ministers in America. They could not understand why we Jews, we soon-to-be rabbis, were so caught up in anti-Semitism in America. We were concerned about Farrakhan and the anti-Semitic things he had said and the failure of certain black leaders to have condemned him. And they said, but you're thriving in America. This is no real threat to you. On an emotional level, they could not understand why anti-Semitism was such a source of sensitivity for us. But I also learned in that time with them, which was frankly a surprise to me, why they were still caught up on the memory of being slaves. But I do understand it now. I understand it in part because our African American brothers and sisters frankly haven't had a Juneteenth as a national moment to pause, to appreciate the horror of our American past, of our world past, of where people were treated like property, dehumanized. There is no full equality when people don't have access to health care. There is no full equality when people don't have the same access to education. There is no full equality when there is a bias that people, by the virtue of their color of their skin, are to be mistreated because they are to be distrusted. And that is the reality that I have seen and experienced, all the more with the use of videos in recent weeks and months. This is a time where our nation has reason to pause and to say it's not enough to say, I am not racist. It's necessary to say, I am anti-racist. It's not enough to say, all kinds of people died in the Holocaust. We Jews know that, yes, many others died, but we particularly suffered. African Americans on Juneteenth have reason to feel the pain of their past and to know that they, as a people, were set apart and are still in many ways set apart. This is a moment to be in favor of equality for all. There is a therefore. The therefore of Pesach, as we taste those bitter herbs, is that no one should suffer the dehumanization of slavery, that all have a right in God's eyes to freedom. And the therefore of Juneteenth is that there is a road to freedom, a road that has not yet been fully crossed, a road that each of us has a responsibility to help each other see as a necessary journey for us as a nation. Freedom is yet ahead.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more crying, no more crying, no more crying over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. They'll be singing, they'll be singing, they'll be singing, they'll be singing over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, we shall overcome someday. May it not be in the distant future. May it not be in the afterlife. May we overcome together, seeking justice, seeking opportunity, seeking freedom for all today. Amen.
Amen.